Hello, this is John, and welcome to my channel. Thank you for watching. It is basically in Mandarin Chinese or Cantonese, but today I would like to share some material in English. That's why it's done in English as well. In the previous decade, I spent some time, over 150 hours of conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses in my neighborhood. Talking to them in their public witnessing in the streets, some private one-to-one or one-to-two Bible discussions in cafes or in some restaurants. It gave me a good insight of what Jehovah's Witnesses are talking about, how their beliefs are not biblically found. That is why I come up with a channel trying to inform especially the global Chinese community overseas. They may not be fully aware of such a biblical and cultic behavior of Jehovah's Witnesses. Recently, there's a governing body updates, and the topic, toasting and clinking glasses, is now a personal decision. This is from avoidjws.org, and from the website, they list the historical development since 1950s. That means for over 70 years, toasting is not allowed in JW religion, but recently, in July 2025, it's okay for them. I found that some YouTube channels are doing the introduction and discussion regarding the topic. One of them is JW Escape by Elaine. I think her ideas are more insightful and brief on a personal level, plus more insightful about the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's have a look of the following video, which I did with the Chinese translation of the subtitles. I hope that you find it useful. And please remember to subscribe to my channel as well. See you.
Hi friends, thanks so much for tuning in today. I know it's been a little while since I have made a video. You know, I've been doing videos, been making videos for 6 years now, nearly every week. And it's just been a struggle for me lately to deal with anything Jehovah's Witness. But I wanted to, I'm working on that, by the way. I wanted to make this video because I want to talk to you a little bit about Stephen Lett and his announcement. I'm not going to show the video. I'm sure you've already seen it, but I want to share my thoughts on it, about the toasting. I also want to share my thoughts on a situation that had happened to me regarding a toast years ago, and a couple of other things, particularly what will be starting in the midweek meeting next week, which kind of applies to this whole treating adults like children, okay? So, as you know, Stephen Lett recently made this strange announcement that Jehovah's Witnesses are now allowed to raise a toast. Yes, a toast. Clinking glasses, saying cheers, I don't know, something that, this was something that was considered worldly in the past, even connected to false religion. And now suddenly it's a conscience matter. I have to ask why? Why bring this up? Why now? This obscure rule gets brought up now amidst so many changes. I have to wonder why. So let's take a closer look at this, okay? So Stephen Lett begins by comparing Jehovah's Witnesses to little children. He says something like, may not be an exact quote, but okay, when we were young, we had to hold our parents' hand across the street. But as we matured, we learned to look both ways and cross on our own. He says this is just like spiritual maturity, that Jehovah's Witnesses don't need a rule for every situation anymore. They should use their Bible-trained conscience to make a good decision. Really? Because for decades, Jehovah's Witnesses were trained not to trust their own thinking. They were told the governing body speaks for Jehovah. that questioning their rules was dangerous, that obeying the organization was obeying God. And now Stephen Lett acts like Jehovah's Witnesses should have been making their own decisions all along. That's not maturity. That's manipulation, friends. And here's what makes this even more bizarre. At the same time, Lett says we're spiritually mature. Jehovah's Witnesses will be studying a children's book. Yes, a literal children's book. Lessons you can learn from the Bible at their midweek meeting starting around July 14th. Of course, this is 2025. It's full of bright illustrations and simplified Bible stories originally made for little kids. But now it's being studied by adults. And they're taking 30 minutes out of their midweek meetings to do so. So let's get this straight. They say you don't need to be treated like a child anymore. And then in the next breath, they hand you a children's book. That's not treating you like a mature Christian. That's treating you like someone who can't be trusted to think for themselves. You know, I remember a family member saying about me, that Elaine, she has a mind of her own. She thinks for herself. You better believe I think for myself. And the best decision I made almost 40 years ago was to escape from this organization. It was the hardest thing I ever did. I experienced a loneliness I've never felt, but it was the best decision I ever made. You know, it's like the organization is saying, we'll give you some freedom, but we're still going to hold that leash. Lett says, toasting may have had roots in false religion, but today it's a friendly custom. He says it's no longer necessary to have a rule, and each witness can decide for themselves what to do. But here's the thing, all right? So we know witnesses don't celebrate birthdays. They don't go to holiday parties, right? A good portion of them do not work in corporate jobs where toasting is common. Many of them work blue-collar jobs. They've, of course, been discouraged from higher education. And toasting, that might happen once in a decade, maybe at a wedding reception, if that, but that's what happened to me. It was about 40 years ago. I was married to a former Bethelite. And we went to a wedding, and I can't remember what wedding it was. It must have been one of my coworkers. And at the reception, somebody was walking around with those big video cameras. Remember they had them back in the 80s on the shoulder? And he was going around from table to table saying, toast to the bride and groom. And everybody was raising their glass. And it was such a happy occasion until they got to us. And we were shaking. I mean, what are we going to do? The video camera was rolling. It's not like today on your phone, you know, you can just stop it, right? The video camera was rolling and we had to look down. Basically, we had to ignore this man. He said, hey, you guys, let's toast. And then eventually he just moved along. And you know what? We, the Jehovah's Witnesses, looked like fools. And now Stephen Lett says it's okay. But back to what I was saying earlier about it basically being some obscure custom that really doesn't apply to the everyday Jehovah's Witnesses because they're so separate from the world where toasts might be common. I have to ask, why make an announcement about something that has almost zero relevance to the everyday witness? They don't really attend formal events, but the governing body members do. They make real estate deals, right? They work with lawyers. They meet with government officials and high-dollar donors, and in those circles, toasting is normal. Declining to raise a glass could come off as rude or even suspicious, right? Think about when they sold the Brooklyn properties for as the Brooklyn Eagle, the local newspaper there, they reported over $2 billion those Brooklyn properties were sold for. I think a parking lot was sold for $90 million, right? So could you imagine if, as those real estate deals were going down and they finally closed the deal, let's raise a toast, here we go, and the governing body members sit there looking like fools? You would have to wonder who would benefit from this new freedom. Certainly not the average witness. The governing body does, friends, and they dress it up as maturity, but they never admit they were wrong for the decades of shame, guilt, feeling foolish, and the isolation that this rule caused. I remember what it felt like at that wedding. It was awful. The whole room raising their glasses, and me and my husband stiff, uncomfortable, unsure what to do, because I was trained to believe that Jehovah was always watching, right? And he would be offended by one clink of the glass. And now it was never really a sin at all, was it? This is not about toasting. It's about control. It's about giving you freedom only when they say you're ready for it, while still treating you like someone who can't be trusted to think for yourself. They create the rules, they remove the rules, and somehow you are always the one to be corrected. So if you're waking up, if you're beginning to question, you're not crazy, you're not rebellious, you're not alone, you're just beginning to think for yourself. And that's something to celebrate, friends. Cheers to that.